Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Future You student panel discussion, where we'll be talking about future graduation opportunities, where we've got a very special panel lined up today. Every single one of us will be talking about our own personal experiences moving into the graduate market after finishing our degrees. So without further ado, we'll have an introduction to the panel now. I'll just start off with myself. So my name is Adam Francis. I work at JISC, who have organised this event. I did an English and creative writing degree, and now I work as a degree fraud officer shutting down fake universities. So my job's very exciting. Sunita, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name's Sunita, and I just graduated earlier this year from Durham University, where I studied English literature. And I very recently started my first job, my new job. I'm actually only on my second week at the moment, and I'm working for an environmental communications and PR agency called Greenhouse.
Oh, fantastic. And Paget, if you'd like to go next.
Yep, hi guys, I'm Paget. I graduated also this summer from Bath with a master's degree in electronic engineering, and in September I started my graduate job as a junior software engineer at a
Nabila, if you'd like to go next.
Yeah, so my name's Nabila, and like everyone else, I graduated this summer. So I actually read law at Sheffield Hallam University, and I started my graduate job in September on the side of a master's in development education at UCL.
Wonderful. And Sarthak, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarthak, and like everyone else, I graduated this summer with a degree in sports business management from Sheffield Hallam, and I'm recently in my second month of my PhD degree on sport governance and finance in Sheffield Hallam.
Fantastic. I feel a bit stupid after hearing how clever everyone else is and sort of wonderful degrees that they've got. So without further ado, let's just kick off with a question. So I will go to Sunita first. So my first question is, was this always what you wanted to do, and what was your sort of progression path to get to where you are now?
That is a really great question, because I've pretty much always, actually even now, I'd say, had no idea what I wanted to do. And that is completely okay, because I've ended up now starting this new job that I absolutely love, but I didn't know that it was what I wanted to do. And when I stumbled across it, it was like almost completely by chance. And I knew that it really aligned with my interests and my values, but it wasn't necessarily that I was looking for this. When I was looking for graduate jobs over the last sort of summer since graduating, and a little bit while I was doing my degree, but mainly it's been over the last few months that I've really been properly job hunting. I haven't really restricted myself much at all in terms of what I've been looking for. So I've applied for a huge range of things in like marketing and publishing and like just all sorts of different things. If I've seen a role that I think I would really enjoy that, I think I have the right skill set for it, it matches my interests and my passions, then I've gone for it. And I think it's so great when you do have, you know exactly what job you want to do and you can see your career really clearly. That is great, and that can be really helpful. But I also think it can be really helpful to just not limit yourself and to be really open to lots of different opportunities. So I didn't even know that environmental communications was like a thing that existed. And the PR agency that I'm working for now is very niche. There's not really any other companies that are doing that. But for me, the combination of like PR and communications, which really appealed to me because like I studied English, I love languages, I did a lot of like writing and blogging and stuff while I was at uni. And then also the environmental side of it, because I'm so into that. I did loads of environmental campaigning stuff while I was at uni. So that was really, really appealing to me in terms of just my personal passions and motivations. So seeing that was like combined in a job role, I loved the idea of it and I applied for it and I was lucky enough to get it. So there really wasn't any particular path that led me here other than just applying to a ton of different things, seeing what came back and eventually finding something that I think resonated perfectly with me and I think just was a perfect fit.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you found a job that suits you so well. Nabila, how does that stack up to your experiences? And did you find that you knew exactly what you wanted to do, or that it was kind of a zigzag?
I think quite similar to Sunita, really. Not so much as zigzag as, I suppose, as just like almost like a parallel move into like another field. So I was actually the youngest person in my family, so all my cousins were like a lot older than me, and I knew that, you know, if I wanted to hang out with them, I just sort of had to learn very quickly to hold my own because I didn't want to be bullied by them. So I would like very much, you know, like give back as good as I got, essentially. And it just became a running joke in the family because I had an answer for everything, that they were like, oh, well, she's definitely going to become a lawyer then. And I think I was about 6 years old at this point, and I was like, yeah, I am. And what? So I went away to university to read law. And I think I was really fortunate. So I got to do an internship at like a legal 500 law firm as part of my degree. And I got to work for my students' union and experience like lots of different jobs, really, and like lots of different roles. But I think because I was working part-time alongside my degree as a youth worker, and like Sunita mentioned, like I feel like uni, everyone sort of gets involved in like students organising or like a society or something. And I think a lot of that really influenced the way I saw the legal sector. And I think once I'd actually worked in a law firm, I was like, oh, actually, I'm not really 6 years old anymore. I probably should have thought this through. It's not really what I want to do. So I've moved into development education now, and I'm hoping to go into policy. So it still sort of ties in with law, but it's not exactly a lawyer's job. So yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a journey.
No, that's good. I think one of the more reassuring things about law is that it gives you such a broad palette of skills that you can apply it to something like education or something like policy and manage to get on quite well. So I'm just going to move on to you next now, Paget. When you were deciding what you wanted to do at university, what sort of resources did you have available, i.e. sort of career services or teachers helping you along? What did you use to make the decision that you did?
As in to decide to do engineering at uni?
Yeah.
Oh, God, well, I think I was 17 when you applied to uni, and I'm not sure I even knew then what I wanted to do now, for sure. But I just knew that I was good at physics and math. I enjoyed them, and my dad's like, well, why don't you try engineering? That was kind of my thought process into what I was going to do at uni. The teachers were pretty good at helping us, I guess, but I think because I was one of the only girls going into engineering, maybe I felt a bit more self-conscious about doing it. But I also, on another side, I also didn't really think about being the only girl. I didn't really see it as a problem or anything like that. But the teachers were useful as a career service. I don't think we had a whole team dedicated to it, but they still helped out applications for that.
Fantastic. And what about you, Sarthak? How did you manage to get where you are, and how did you make the decision?
Well, like first of all, I guess many people think that PhD is basically, you can say, a degree, but at the end of the day, it is nothing less than a full-time job. You have to commit to it full-time, and the good part is I get paid to. So that is one of the good parts of studying. But apart from it, the support I had was from the university, from the lecturers. So, like everyone else, when I had no clue of what I wanted to do when I graduated. All I wanted to do was probably work in a professional football club because I love football. But as I moved along, the priorities started changing slowly, and it was essentially sitting down with the career service and my lecturers that, okay, this is what you are probably good at. And by the time I was in my final year, I published a few research papers, and that was basically the point when my lecturer said that you should really consider doing a PhD. And then when the pandemic struck, it was basically, you can say, a no-brainer that somebody is offering a full-time salary to study a degree, and that was it from there.
Yeah, so I can imagine it was quite an attractive proposition then, just being essentially told that you can be paid to learn full-time. That's incredible. So we've got a question from Andre in the chat. He would like to know if anyone's completed a BA to go on to do an MSc. So just sort of switching up the pathways there. Has anyone done an MSc, Master of Science? No. I'll take that as a no then.
No,
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is possible, Andrea. I think I've heard of people doing that before, but
I have friends who've done that. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
It's not uncommon. I think there's a huge amount of flexibility
I
within
have
the
friends.
university
I have
sector.
friends who went from.
You have friends
I
who
have
went
friends
from
who
doing a
went
BA
from
to an
BSc
MSc.
to MA.
Okay, that's interesting. So lots of different variations that we can do.
I think from at Bath you could. So I knew people that switched from doing like a B engine to an MSc. I think if you're staying in your university, they make it a lot easier for you than having to apply to a whole different uni.
Fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Because like the same course that I'm doing at UCL, I know SOAS offer it as an MSc, whereas UCL offer it as an MA. And then my friend did a BA in criminology, and he applied for the same like masters as me. So it's definitely possible, and if that's what you want to do, definitely like go for it.
I think what it comes down to is that ultimately you just have to speak to your university. They're a resource like anything else. You just have to speak to them, say, this is what I want to do with my life. This is the sort of plan that I have for myself. Even if you don't necessarily have a plan, it always pays to speak to university staff and just say, how can you help me achieve what I want to do? Right, fantastic. So if we just move on to one of our next questions. So let's start with Nabila. So what was the biggest challenge for you personally when looking for jobs, and how did you overcome that?
I mean, I think because I graduated this summer, and I don't know, I'm sure like a lot of other graduates would probably agree, is that because of COVID, like there wasn't as much opportunity in terms of, jobs that you could normally apply for, like graduate internships or like a lot of graduate jobs. And a lot of companies who would have previously offered like work experience just weren't doing it anymore. And the ones that, were available, like they required like people who had all this experience. And I think when, you go online, you look at the job description, and when you have like 3 pages of a job description and you think, oh my goodness, like what? How long is this going to, like, how can I possibly match up to this when, someone who's got the same qualifications as me probably has like 5 years more experience in the sector. But I think like a really big thing for me personally was, realizing that a lot of us do have skills and like pockets of knowledge that we don't really appreciate because it's something that we've sort of, cultivated over the years, and we don't really notice it as a skill or as a piece of knowledge. So what I actually did was essentially, like, it sounds really cheesy, but like reevaluate my skill set almost. And I think it was a little bit like what Sunita was saying, how, she didn't think that was a job she wanted, but that's what she ended up going into. And I realized that I was actually very good at advice work, and I, particularly cared about like a lot of welfare issues. So when my current job came up, and it's a housing advisor at a students' union, I applied for it, even though, it wasn't what I initially like envisaged myself doing. So I think COVID was probably the biggest challenge for me, but like really understanding that actually you do have skills that you might not necessarily consider skills, or like areas of interest that you might not consider a career, are like things that are definitely worth pursuing.
Sure. Yeah, I guess same question to you, Sunita, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see that Rima's asked quite a relevant question in the chat as well. So I'll try to link it to that because I think that's such a great question. But I totally agree with what you said, Nabila. I definitely found the same thing. Like, I think we all have to be our own champions and like realize that we've picked up really relevant, like transferable skills with all the things that we've done in uni, and like whatever extra things you might have done on the side, whether that's part-time work or like getting involved in a student society, or even just things that you've organized with your friends. Like there's some relevant skill to be found in everything, and we really have to recognize that and not feel like when you see a list of those things on a job description that they're looking for, like don't feel like, oh, this isn't, I can't match up to all of these, because you can dig out examples for those skills from somewhere. So yeah, I totally resonate with what you said. And I really just wanted to talk about what you asked Rima in the chat, because I think that's such a fantastic question, and definitely something which I had like a learning experience with over summer when I was like properly in the zone with applying for jobs. Because when I first started, I think I just went about it very like haphazardly and was sort of firing off applications at random to whatever things I saw that looked vaguely like, okay, I think I'm qualified for this, or like, this looks like a cool job. And I just sort of, put together an application at like 11:30 p.m. and like send it off, and it would just be a bit all over the place because I don't know, I'd just see something and get really excited about it and be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to apply for this. But I wasn't really like focusing and actually structuring the way that I was doing that. And it is difficult, like you said, like with the current circumstances, it is harder. And, everybody's around us going, oh, the job market is the worst it's ever been and stuff. So it's easy to get beaten down by that. But one of the things that I found really helped me to focus was just to make it a really structured process. So I literally like created a spreadsheet. Anytime I'd find an opportunity that I thought, okay, I like that, or I want to apply for that, I'd put it in the spreadsheet. And like, it sounds really, I don't know, like rigorous, but it helped me so much. And like, I put in all the details about it. So I'd say, when's the deadline for this application, and put that in, put in the web link so I could easily find the application page again if I needed to, and then like any other details. And so I ended up creating this whole spreadsheet, which every time I saw something new, I'd just add it on there, and then I'd order it by the deadline date. So I knew what my priorities were in terms of, okay, this is something I need to apply for by next week. And then if I got like an interview or like assessment test back from one of them, then I just add that into the spreadsheet. So it just meant that there was one place where I could clearly see all of my priorities and everything that I had to do. And it immediately just made me more focused. It meant that I put more quality time into each application rather than just randomly firing things off. And I think that, like you asked, how do you submit as many applications as possible? I think like it's really useful to reframe that mindset and go from like, how do I submit lots and lots of applications, to how do I make sure every single thing I submit is the highest possible quality it can be, even if it means you only do like one application in like a week or like a couple of weeks or whatever, however long it takes you is fine. But when you send that off, you should make sure that you feel like, I have put everything into that application and it's something I'm really proud of, because that's what's going to get you results in the end. Like, that's definitely what I learned from my experience, because when I was just firing things off, I wasn't getting anything back because I wasn't really putting like my time and my effort into it. Whereas as soon as I started focusing on quality and like structuring how I was going about the job application process, it just massively changed things for me. So that would be my advice on that. I don't know if the rest of you guys have anything to add about that.
I think I really resonate with you, because I also had a spreadsheet with all the applications on, and I would color code it, and if I got rejected, I'd turn it red, and then I'm starting a new spreadsheet. This is too sad.
No, I think some really, really valuable points have been made there, just to not treat the job application process like it's a bunch of really abstract applications which are just flying around in the air. Like, ultimately, it's a finite resource which can be measured. You can organize it and put it in a spreadsheet. And as Sunita said, I think it's really, really important to treat each application like it's the only job you're applying for, because otherwise you do just tend to get it lost in the shuffle and tend to repeat yourself or just make really common mistakes. So yeah, just take a breather, stand back, and just try and look at the bigger picture. So Sarthak, would you mind just telling us about the biggest difficulty you faced in your PhD applications?
Okay, so writing the proposal is the biggest difficulty ever, because you have to write everything, cram everything into 1,500 words. And for me, the biggest difficulty was, how do I tell the story of what 1,500 words? So that was one of the biggest difficulties. But then the major challenge was, just like any job interview, you have to pass a round of PhD panel, and worst of it was all virtual, sitting in a home locked at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, on a summer afternoon when you can't go out to have barbecue chicken with friends in the park. You're sitting out for a PhD interview. So that was one of the challenges. And people in front of you, I mean, like, you know that you can't blabber in front of them because they know everything. And if you try to even blabber or do anything, they will essentially, you can say, challenge it. So what I did for the PhD interview was essentially sat down for 6 or 7 mock interviews with people who have recently started their PhD, the future prospective supervisor, tap into the networks, the groups I am in, academic groups I am in. And by the time I went for my PhD interview, I was really confident to crack it. And even if there are some questions which I might not be able to answer correctly, but I can still tackle it to the best of my abilities. And I guess that is important for, like you can say, job interview. You might not be able to answer everything that is asked of you, and that is perfectly fine. You just have to tackle it, and you have to basically, you can say, prove to the interviewer that you are able to adapt to the situation.
That's a really good point. We've just got a question from Charlie in the chat. So, how long on average would it take you to fill out an application? So I think we'll go to Paget for this one because she seemed to be on it in terms of organisation.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the application is really an annoying answer. But, a lot of the ones I did, it was a CV and a cover letter. So I would keep my CV the same, so that was no time. And then by the end of my application process, I got pretty good at working out a formula of how to write a cover letter. You know, there's like, introduce yourself, talk about why you want the job, talk about the skills you have for the job, and then say you're available for interview. So I would literally just fill in the blanks like that, so I could get an application out pretty quick. And then I think with that, when you have to do the whole application forms thing, they ask you questions which do come up quite a lot in other applications as well. So I'd keep a Word document of all the questions I'd answered before, and I would pick out examples that are still related to it. So the first few ones are quite long, but once you get the hang of it, it can go quite quickly.
Does anyone struggle with getting applications done in a sort of timely way? Because I know I'm the absolute worst for it. I'm like a dog with a squirrel. I just get distracted so easily. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about this, but I was just wondering if anyone had any tips for someone like me who gets distracted quite easily and finds it quite difficult to complete applications.
I think what worked for me was like setting aside time. So it wasn't like a task I had to do for the day. Like I'd essentially timetable it into my day and I'd like tell my family and like switch off my phone. And I'd have to sit there. And I genuinely because like you said, Adam, like I'm so easily distracted. Like I would genuinely like box myself into my bedroom and be like, I have to do this, or I'm just, I just need the job. So, but because I was doing it like alongside like doing my uni assessments and I was still working at like my other job, I couldn't allocate loads and loads of time for it. So I had to be very smart, and like sometimes it's a bit sad because you see a really cool job and you're like, oh, that'd be great to apply for, but you've got to pick the jobs that you would like really, really, really like to do, and B, like think that you actually have a really good shot at getting. And I just have to pick an application that way and then allocate like across 2 days for it. But that was my thing, like box yourself off. And it's a bit like doing an assessment or an exam, I suppose.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like that's really good advice. And like, I think one of the things that's important to like in terms of how you treat the whole job application process is like see it the same as, I don't know, if you're writing like an essay or doing a task for uni or like something which you treat as like work. If you treat that in the same way, then I think that it really helps, because just like Nabila said, you sort of structure it into your day and you go in advance like, okay, I'm going to spend this evening or this afternoon or this whole day working on job applications. And like I think especially for me when it came to the last few months and I wasn't doing anything else alongside because I finished my part-time job, obviously I finished my degree over summer, so I was just sort of at home. And before, when I was just randomly firing off applications, I think one of the reasons why I really struggled was because I was just doing it at like random times of day, and I'd be, writing a job application in one window and like watching a YouTube video on another window. So it just like was not productive at all. Whereas later on, I actually sort of started to say to myself, okay, I'm going to do this like a 9 to 5 working day. So I'm going to make sure I take a lunch break in the middle. I'm going to make sure I like, go out for walks in like the morning or the evening or whatever, and be doing other stuff around it. But when I'm sitting down doing the job application stuff, I'm just doing that. Like I'm not procrastinating doing anything else. It's like I'm treating it like it's a working day. And that really helped me, because I think it sort of made a clear boundary between, okay, when am I working on this and when am I taking it really seriously, and when is my time to just like chill and relax and have a chat with like friends over Zoom or like whatever it is. And I think it's really important to make that distinction, because otherwise you can either fall into the trap of spending all your time on job applications, which is not healthy and not productive at all, or you sort of do what I was doing before, which is just not really spending proper quality time on it at all and just sort of being a bit all over the place. So yeah, I think what you said, Nabila, is really great advice. Like, make sure you know in advance when you want to do it and schedule that time, and that will help you to be more productive.
Just following on from the application question, we've got one from Bethany. She would like to know, does anyone have any advice or recommendations of resources for putting together a high quality application? So I'm assuming that's in reference to either formatting or just the way it looks, or just having the sort of best language on there, which, given how competitive the market is, I guess we do kind of need to stand out. So does anyone have an experience in sort of putting together a really, really glossy document?
We had at Bath, there was a really good career service, and you could book appointments with them and go and talk to them about your applications and stuff like that. So if you have a career service, if you're at uni, definitely go and see them and talk to them, and they can give you loads of advice. If you've only got the internet, there's loads of like job sites that post jobs that also give you advice on how to write CVs and job applications like that.
Does anyone? Oh, yeah, Nabila?
No, I was just trying to think really, and I think, like, I definitely went to the uni advice centre, and they were really, really helpful. But like when I was looking online, especially to write cover letters, it sounds really weird, but if you're at uni and you have to write essays or you have to do a piece of work, I'd essentially read back on like my old pieces of work. It sounds very narcissistic. But it was just like, I am capable of stringing sentences together. And sometimes when you've literally been in lockdown for months and you've only been speaking to the same people, like you lose the ability to write. Like it's a skill that, if you don't use it, like you do lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And just reading back on like other pieces of work, or like Paget mentioned, like reading bits on the internet really helped me like help how to like structure language. And once you sort of get into the flow of it, like it works a lot easier than trying to keep like just uncomfortably trying to write something when you're just not in the space to write it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what this has underscored is how essential the career services at uni are. Ultimately they're there because they want to get you into a job, so just don't underestimate just how valuable those resources are, because I guarantee they will do everything within their power to help you. So if we just move on to one of the next questions. How similar / contrasting were the different assessment centres that you went through as part of different job applications? Does anyone want to start off?
Yeah, I'll go. I did 2 assessment centres. One of them was before the pandemic, so it was an in-person one. And one of them was after the pandemic at Capgemini, where I got this job. So that was virtual, so they were pretty contrasting. But I think for my job, there's usually like a group task, and there's an interview, one-on-one interview, and then some other kind of activity. I'm not sure if that's how other assessment centres work, but that's how mine would run.
Anyone else have experience with assessment centres?
I just had to do a presentation for mine, really.
Actually, what?
Sorry, I think we've got a few technical issues. Yeah, Sarthak, do you want to continue that point?
Yeah. So before, like, I applied for my PhD, I was actually like also applying for jobs within the industry, and I applied for one of the big 4 accounting firms. I wouldn't name the firm, and I was kind enough to be invited for their virtual assessment. The sad part is it didn't go at all well because of all the tech-savvy things which I'm not very good at. And they have some sort of mobile game in it where you have to pop balloons and stuff. I don't know why, but apart from that, what they did was you have to they gave you a market presentation report, the sort of things they make, and you have to, in front of a video, you have to sort of explain it to one of their clients, like what is this report all about. You have to pick out pointers, and that is how they evaluate your techniques.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really, really useful in terms of advice. So Louise would like to know, how do you tackle perfectionism when it comes to job applications? I'm sure a few of us must be guilty here of this. So Sunita, would you like to start us off with that one?
That is such a good question. And I don't know how much I can really honestly say that I've overcome perfectionism. I think even like having started my job now, it's still something that I'm like conscious of, and I'm trying to, ask questions and recognize that there are things that I don't know and that I'll make mistakes and all of that sort of thing. I think with job applications, like it's good to be a perfectionist in the sense that there are a lot of things you obviously want to get right. You want to make sure that you're not, making spelling or grammar mistakes on your cover letter. You want to make sure everything's neat. You want to, answer any questions to the best of your ability, like all of that sort of thing. But I think honestly, you just have to get to a point where you force yourself to like hit send or just be happy with whatever it is that you've put out there, because I definitely know I'd like read over my cover letter like 600 times and be like, oh, what can I change, like them, I don't know, like checking for mistakes and getting really in my head about it. And I really think you just have to sit there and go, okay, I'm just gonna send it off now, because there's only so many times you can read something over and you're not going to find any mistakes anymore. I think a good way to do it, like I sort of didn't really have anyone around me at home that I think could really help me out with that. But if you do have somebody or like a friend that you can email it to, or just anyone who you think would help to give you that final like go ahead, then that's probably a useful thing to do as well. Like if you're really in your head about it and you just want someone to tell you that it's okay and give you a second opinion, that's probably a useful way to go about it as well. But yeah, I'd say just like trust yourself, build up that self-confidence to be like, no, I have done a good job. I've done all my research. I've spent hours on this. It's good. And then just let it go.
Easier said than done, but I think that's
definitely easier said than done. Like I'm sitting here saying that, the amount of times I've just gone over and over something and been like, oh no, how can I make this better? Like, let it
go. So Nabila, how do you deal with the same issue? It's fine to start back if you want to start.
Go for it.
Okay, so in terms of perfectionism, I want to add something basically. So as we are moving forward, most of the companies they check machine learning and AI to basically sort out the first stage of job applications. So my first advice would be to whatever application you write, space it correctly, take care of the indents and the alignments, and make sure you either use Arial, Calibri, or Times New Roman font, because those are the only acceptable fonts in the professional world, and make them legible, because it doesn't matter how good a candidate you are, the artificial intelligence algorithm doesn't care. They will just reject it if they can't read it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice as well. Yeah, Nabila, if you want to pick up on that point.
So I think it's definitely really hard letting go, and completely agree what Sunita was saying. It's a lot easier said than done. What I used to do was I'd give myself what I called internal deadlines. So I had the spreadsheet, and it was these are all the links, this is when I need to apply by, and then next to the deadline date for the closing date for the application, I'd have another tab saying internal deadline, and it's essentially by this date, Nabila, you need to get a grip and send it. And that was just a note to myself, essentially, to be I know how long roughly I take on an application. I know roughly I'd do it over 2 evenings, for instance. And that was just mostly my weekend evenings, or my Friday and Saturday night kind of evening. And then I'd have, a date next to it and be well, you need to send it off now, because you've written it, you've read it over, and it's great advice if you can get someone else to read it over. It's so reassuring to hear someone else go, no, that's great, just send it. So yeah, having an internal deadline worked for me, and I hope it works for you.
That's that's really good advice, actually. I feel like there's real anxiety. I know I had this, and maybe this is why you did this as well, but there's real anxiety around submitting something quite early. If the deadline for an application was I don't know, next month, I might have finished it now and be ready, and I've done everything. I've done all my research. I feel all the questions are good. But I'm oh, if the deadline is next month, I feel I should spend loads more time on it, when actually that's not, the deadline isn't there to tell you need to spend 3 months on this application. It's just a deadline. So I think that's such great advice, the internal deadline thing. I would definitely try that out if you're struggling with not sending something off.
Yeah. Just send it off. It's saying, if you got it finished but there's still a month within the deadline, just send it off, because otherwise it's going to be hanging over your head for a month, being I need to change this one bit. Whereas if it's gone, and then it's out of your hands.
Definitely.
So we've got a really interesting question from Eleanor in the chat. So she would like to know, in your applications, how did you explain applying for a job that doesn't have a direct correlation with your degree? So, for instance, I've got an English degree and then I'm now working as a contractor for the government, shutting down fake universities. So there's not a whole lot of crossover in that sense. But yeah, I think personally for me, it helps to really recognize what transferable skills you have gained as part of your degree. Those are so important when you actually go into the workplace, because you don't even realize it at the time while you're studying, but those skills will stay with you for life. So if you just sort of take a step back, take a sort of stock evaluation of all the skills that you've got and everything that you've learned on your course. Personally, I think it's a lot easier to go into the application process and just say, right, this is what I'm good at. This is what I need to do as part of my job. Here's how I can bridge the gap. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add about? Because I think, Sunita, I think your degree is quite different from what you ended up doing as a job.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think with something like English, like, I mean, obviously it's not sort of a vocational degree, and I guess a lot of people will have this, but like your degree just might not link necessarily to any future job or career in particular. But I mean, with English, in terms of my personal case, I think that like English pretty much links to everything. Like obviously there are some jobs which you need like more specific training for, especially if you're going into something quite, I don't know, like scientific or technical or anything like that. You'd need like a lot of additional training to make you like specialize for that job. But English just has skills that like everyone is always going to need. Like that's why we all study a language, like wherever you might be from. We all study some kind of language or literature or whatever at school, because it just has skills for everything, you know, like communication, collaboration, being able to like write and read proficiently. Like all of those are just such strong and important skills, which are not only going to make you good for like a particular job, but they're just going to make you a good person to have on a team, because you can say, you know, I write clearly, I communicate efficiently, I'm good at getting my point across, like all of those kinds of things. So I think just take whatever it is that you've done in your degree, and I mean it is exactly what Adam said, but literally just turn those into transferable skills that you can then explain to, you know, on your application or to whoever it is that's interviewing you, and said, you know, well, I did this in my degree, but this is how it makes me a great person to just be in your workplace. And I think that's definitely a good way to go about it.
Sure. Padgett, how did you end up bridging the skills?
Yeah, so my career is in software and I did my degree in engineering. So not completely different fields, but there was a bit of a jump. For me, luckily, like software engineering development is a hobby of mine, so I could tell them my skills and also show them that I had an interest and enjoyed software. So I think for jobs that you're applying to, you need to tell them and show them clearly that you enjoy and you have an interest in what you're applying for. Otherwise, they're not going to think that you're that enthusiastic about it, and they're not going to bother with you.
And how about you, Nabila?
It's like quite similar to what Padgett said, really, because, you know, if you're applying for a job in a different field, then like clearly there's something about that job that's like interests you, but also that led you there. And if that has anything to do with your university experience, even if it's like, I was at university doing this degree and I went to a society event and I thought it was great, you know, like draw those links. If it's something you did like volunteering, like whatever it is that led you to applying to that job, like really highlight it. Even if it doesn't like directly correlate, with your degree title. There we go. But yeah, I think just highlight what it is that led you there, and like everyone's mentioned, like, and how those transferable skills that you have, like, essentially back up your interest.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I think especially graduates who are like graduating this summer, like we have all finished our degrees during COVID and like during a pandemic, and if that doesn't show a level of resilience, like I don't know what does. So you're all highly employable, so don't worry about that.
That's very true. I just want to move on to one last question just before we finish. What do you personally wish you'd known before entering the graduate marketplace, or in Sarthak's case, going on to PhD level? So Sarthak, do you want to start us off? Just what would you do differently at undergraduate level if you know what you now?
Well, I am, you can say, in a slightly different position, because not many students directly go from undergraduate to a PhD. And what I wish I had known is I wish I had a bit of more master's level training before I started my PhD. Like a couple of days ago, I couldn't write anything to save my life and started suffering from imposter syndrome, which is common in PhD, which I spoke about after and realized that this will happen for the first year to fit in. But in terms of the graduate market, what I realized speaking to more people, and currently I run a football data analyst, it is not as with a data hiring a person with the skills who is adding some value to the team that I am hiring or I want to be hired as a team. And what I am bringing to the table, not just with my job skills, like, okay, in such a year, probably you need to know certain amount of, like, say, coding skills for, say, Java or Python or whatever it is. From that, how are you as a person and what do you actually add of intangible values will basically say in the workplace? How of that is something I wish I had learned more. And
That's, yeah, that's really good advice. So Paget, in a minute or less, what would you have done differently?
I would say don't expect to get the first job that you apply for.
Yeah.
You're going to get rejected quite a few times.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like that because you're not supposed to really be good at interviews the first interview you give. So you need to apply to jobs and you need to do the interviews. And you need these interviews to learn how to do the interview for the job that you're going to get right at the end of it. So don't worry about being really nervous in interviews. It's all good practice and it will all be worthwhile.
Like, how about you, Nabila? What do you wish you'd known?
I think before I started my degree, I definitely wish I'd actually been a bit more bold with emailing people and asking for work experience. Because if I'd had even a fraction of the experiences I'd had before, I think it definitely would have made me maybe not change my mind, but at least reconsider what direction I wanted to go in. And the person you are at 16 isn't necessarily the person you are at 18 or 21 or however old you are when you end up finishing uni. So yeah, I think that would be my big one.
I'd have to agree with that, actually. And I think people undervalue just how many internships there are out there. If you look at the Prospects website in particular, so many work experience options, all paid. So it's definitely something worth looking at. And Sunita, if you'd just like to finish this off.
Yeah, I would absolutely resonate with what everyone else has said so far and just add, don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Literally just ignore, even your best friends, ignore them, because everybody has their own journey. Everyone's doing their own thing. Loads of my friends are doing master's degrees. Some are doing completely different sort of graduate roles to me. And there were so many times where I looked around and went, oh my God, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? No, we all have individual goals and dreams and journeys. So just do not get in your head about what other people are doing. And sometimes if you need to distance yourself as well, do that if it makes you sort of feel better and you're kind of able to, just get on with your own thing more. So just don't worry about what anyone else is doing and you do you.
No, it's great advice. It's great advice. Well, thank you to everyone on the panel for joining us today. It's been massively helpful. And I can see from the comments in the chat that everyone's really, really valued what you guys are saying. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today. Please join us at any future events. We'd love to have you. And if you've got any questions, I believe Matt's popped it in the chat, but you can contact us at virtualfair@prospects.ac.uk just with any follow-up questions you might have. But thank you everyone for joining us and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.